more heavily regulated state than a lot of people realize. The fact is, if you were to read the Virginia Administrative Code, which is the stack of regulations that govern our lives from the time we wake up in the morning until we go to bed at night, and you made it your full-time job, 8 hours a day for a 5-day work week, a 40-hour work week, it would take you 3 months to read it all. Not to understand it all, but just to read it all. So I know we've got antiquated regulations that we need to weed out. I know we've got regulations that we need to modernize, and for every new regulation I put forward, and we're going to obviously put forward regulations in our administration. No one supports an unregulated economy. But for every new one we promulgate, we need to repeal or modernize 2 old ones. And so you would have a net reduction in regulatory burden by the end of my governorship if I'm entrusted with the governorship of the Commonwealth we love. There are other things that we need to do, and one of the things is to give regulated populations some more say in whether or not these regulations make sense. And so I would institute what I call the regulatory red flag program, where if 10% of a regulated population says this regulation is unduly burdensome, hindersome, antiquated, we would have an expedited process by which we would review that regulation in my departments and agencies. 90 days to take a look at it. If 10% of a regulated population comes forward and says this is a counterproductive, undue, unnecessary, burdensome regulation. Now, in that 90 days, we might conclude they're exactly right and recommend repeal of that antiquated regulation. We might say, well, it shouldn't be repealed, but it should be modernized because it was put in place before the internet, and we ought to adapt it to the modern economy. Or they might agree that it's antiquated and unnecessary and should be off the books. Or they might disagree completely and say we need to keep it and take into account the concerns, but that the protection that's necessary for the consumer or the worker doesn't warrant a repeal, and would recommend keeping it. But it would at least give those who are subject to the regulations some recourse and some ability to be able to say, we need to take a fresh look at this. And so regulatory relief and also reducing the cost of compliance with regulations by making our state government more responsive and making it easier for, in particular, small businesses who take a disproportionate burden when it comes to compliance costs to regulation, to make it easier for them to comply, to not have to fill out the same, for example, information at 3 different agency or department websites. Just do it once and let it cover all 3 of those. That kind of thing can make it so much easier to open and grow a business to comply. We also need to take a fresh look at our occupational licenses and the burdens those impose and the barriers to entry they become to entrepreneurship in our economy. And according to the Mercatus Center, we are the 9th most stringently regulated state in the country when it comes to occupational licenses. To be a barber in Virginia, you need to complete 3 months worth of state required courses and training and then pay a licensing fee every year to get your barber's license. I think we can reduce some of these burdens and barriers. I don't know about others, but I've never gotten a second bad haircut from the same barber. I can figure this out on my own. I certainly want my dentist to have a license, but I think there are areas where we can reduce these burdens, eliminate these burdens and these barriers to entry to allow for more entrepreneurship to flourish in the Commonwealth.